Welcome. I'm Carol Casto. I'm the Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command Deputy Chief Management Officer for Strategy and Future Requirements, and I lead the institutionalization of Get Real, Get Better within the command. This episode marks the fourth installment in our quarterly series, featuring NAVFAC leaders as they share insights on the organization, their leadership styles, and the impactful work we engage in daily. Sitting with me is the current NAVFAC Atlantic Commander, Director, Fleet Installations and Environmental Division, and U.S. Fleet Forces Command Fleet Civil Engineer, Rear Admiral Jorge Cuadros, to discuss how he utilizes the Get Real, Get Better methodology in his daily approach to leadership. Thank you, Admiral Cuadros, for being here.
Thank you, Carol.
Having held diverse positions within the Systems Command, such as NAVFAC Chief of Staff, NAVFAC Southeast Commanding Officer, NAVFAC Your Absent Executive Officer, and the FIA Director at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, you've held positions worldwide, and you definitely bring an enterprise-wide perspective. Given your success as a leader at NAVFAC in various roles, what GRGB behaviors have been the most impactful in helping you achieve success?
Well, first of all, Carol, thank you for the invitation. It's always nice to come back to headquarters and see so many familiar faces. So I hold it close to my heart, but I'm very happy where I'm at. So aligning the standards and goals and embracing the red just really jump out at me. And I'm going to give you a couple NAVFAC instructions. NAVFAC instruction 11013.40 Bravo. It's the instruction on partnering. 11013.41 Alpha. It's a recent instruction on governance. We have a kilogram 2303 that talks about governance as well. We have a Navy Pub 406, which also talks about governance and partnering. But like that, we have many other standards like the post-award kickoff meeting, the conduct of the pre-construction meeting, the conduct of production meetings. So the standards are out there, and and I'm a firm believer that what we have is enough for success in any of our projects. But the question is, how often do we actually follow those standards to get there? And so, having talked about standards, I think one key, and I'm on standard back on governance, right? So the NAVFAC instruction that was signed in October last year that talks about our project governance. It is a key to success, and it's there, and it's scalable. As written, it talks about big projects. But my belief is that we can scale this, the intent of that instruction to any of our projects where we see risk and really enable success. And so how I say we do that is through, the appropriate setting of goals, right? So goals, can usually say, hey, maintain project flow, drive cost, schedule, quality of performance, communication and collaboration, trust, ownership, etc. But at the end of the day, those goals mean nothing if they don't huddle people around a common, purpose. And so, I explain, as I talk about this, I say, our goals for a project, which is what I'm talking about in this specific case, should almost give you goosebumps, right? You read them and they should give you goosebumps. Everybody, every stakeholder, right? So what if a project goal was, our construction projects enable our Navy to defeat China?
Yeah.
Getting goosebumps?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about, right? So I'm going to give you a silly example that kind of talks in very general terms about any project, but I'm going to give you one from an actual project, right? That goes along the lines of our intent is to build or repair this dry dock with no quality assurance directed rework and budget certainty prior to mission need date, in order to build, sustain, and repair our operational forces that will deter aggression and win in conflict. We're getting the goosebumps?
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
All right, so, but you're going to say, hey, but now everybody's building dry docks, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, I know that, Carol, but, okay, so let's take another project, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, a naval hospital refurbishment, repair, Bethesda, right? So our intent or goal is to build a world-class care facility where the best patient experience and family quality of life is delivered through a project with world-class design, a culture of safety, financial certainty, timely delivery, and a commitment to quality. With timely decision by stakeholders, effective communication and collaboration, and anticipation of issues, and trust. In order to promote readiness and force generation to maximize warfighter capacity and capability. Still getting the goosebumps, right?
Yeah.
Okay, exactly.
Where is that coming from? Is that part of like a statement
this
of
is
work,
actual
or?
governance that we have, so
Wow.
some of our high performing teams
Yeah.
are using these two specific examples within their governance as goals for all stakeholders to follow and huddle around when we have issues, we center on that, and that's how we solve it. Right.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So then your next question is going to be, okay, so how do you do that? Right.
Yeah.
So I focus on KPIs, right? So, and this is all in the governance. This is all in the standards that I read to you.
Yes.
And so I brought an example of a KPI, key performance indicators dashboard for one of our projects, right? So in this particular one, you're able to look at construction progress, quality management, submittals and RFIs, and contract changes. And you have a gauge that tells you how we're doing, and so it's red, yellow, green, red, yellow, green. It tells you the current status. It also shows you the state at the last time we met, right? So it shows you we're moving the needle in the right direction. And it also, shows a goal, right? So for example, for submittals, it says 165 processed to date of 2,603 total, right? That's 6%. First time approval rate, 81%, but our target is 90. Okay, so that, therein, you get, okay, we have an opportunity there to grow.
Yes.
So we follow that. When you follow this, again, you can imagine the stakeholders, around the table focus on this and truly solve problems, right? So I'll come back to this one, but that to me, this is essential, right? KPIs are an essential means to measure how we're, doing, how we're, achieving our goals and aligning to standards.
And finding the red.
And
quickly.
embracing the red.
Yeah.
So that is the key. So this, a process like this allows you to identify the red, right? So let me give you one. So I talked about, RFIs. So 87 resolved to date, 4 open. Average response time 11 days. Target is less than 7 days.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very concrete.
Yeah.
Very clear.
And so during, whether it's the project level team or the senior level team or the executive level team where I participate, we're able to say, okay, what happened there? What's going on? And so take, for example, well, I didn't know that the standard was, 7 days, right? Or, I'll do better. Whether it's government, whether it's A&E, whether it's constructor, right? So, but the key is, and many times we depend, with stakeholders outside of that, right? So part of this process is also a very thorough and deliberate identification of stakeholders. Because a lot of times we assume, hey, it's either NAVFAC, the constructor, and the A&E. Well, we depend on others. Our supportive commanders are stakeholders. The people that maybe it might be a supportive commander, maybe a building right next to where we're building, they're a stakeholder, right? Because they're affected by what we do. So I think that piece is important.
Yeah, very good. Well, those were great examples of aligning on standards and goals and embracing the red. So let's take a shift to get better, because this is our first time that we're actually going to be talking about how do we actually get better, and to act on what matters most and self-correct effectively through fixing or elevating barriers and using problem-solving methods. So change, as you know, is happening at an unprecedented pace right now, more than ever at NAVFAC. Why is it important for staff to feel confident in elevating their issues and sharing their perspectives with leadership?
Yeah, I think a great question, Carol. So some people say change is the only constant, but I do agree with you that in recent past, and recent can be as recent as 4 years, 2 years, last 2 months, but certainly in that time span, we have seen change like I've never experienced before in 34 years. So one key to me is, for my people to understand is, I'm constantly listening, and I say that every time I have an all hands. When I send an email, I have set up multiple ways for people to reach me. So, and I do. I make it a very, very deliberate point to listen. With that in mind, now I can tell people it's like more than ever today. Now is the time for people to elevate issues. Our people in the field are the ones that know how to solve the problems. They know what the barriers are, and let's just say in the past, maybe we've said it. But maybe we really, didn't really mean it. I remember a time when, I actually felt personally like, I don't want to bring my boss any problems, right? He's going to, give me a bad mark on my fit rep, right? I think those times are over. I mean, and seriously speaking, we should kind of approach that and approach things from that perspective. Is like, hey, and I've done this in this job, right? Somebody would say like, yeah, there's my cousin that say, what do you do all day? Sign stuff. And like, no, I do more than that. But yeah, so I brought issues to my boss, and I've approached it from the side. I don't care if he thinks I'm stupid or intelligent. I'm going to bring it up because this is an issue, right? And so I think it really comes from a perspective of humbling yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't, naturally we'll be inclined to not let people see like the weaker side of us.
Yeah.
But there comes a time when any of us reaches their limit in terms of what I can do, what I can control. Circle of influence, circle of control come to mind. And that's the time for the elevation, and the time is now.
Yeah. So how do you encourage and empower your staff to present those challenges or raise barriers and robust? Do you have a structured framework that you use, or is it if you have a problem, come see me? What works for you?
All of the above, and probably more. But I made it a point since taking command at NAVFAC Atlantic and in my N46 role and at Fleet. It's the same, right? And I call it a handshake, and I kind of made it part of my priorities, which I have here with me. And one of the things that so in these priorities, I basically used some language from the strategic plan, or NAVFAC strategic plan. But then I said, hey, to achieve this, here's how I think you can contribute, and here's what you can expect of me. And I actually labeled that, what leaders will do. Not just me, right? I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only person that leads people. Below me, there's many, many others, to include what I think it's at the core, which is the first line supervisor. So I'm telling my folk, through this handshake, right? I'm saying, hey, I'm approachable. This is what I expect of you. So I tell them, be transparent, confront challenges, leverage standard processes, improve project delivery, develop your skills. But I tell them, hey, what I will do is I will encourage innovation, right? Mm-hmm. Innovation is not just technology. Innovation is, hey, what do you think is important? I promise to remove barriers. That's my other commitment. I tell them that I will measure what matters. And I also tell them that I will manage resources and risk based on what I value as KPIs, for example. And so the how is through constant communication, right? I can give you this piece of paper and like, hey, Carol, go read it and come see me. No, I talk about this all the time, and I try to model it, right? So for those of you that have watched Admiral Killian's similar interview, he talked about it. Talking to people should not just be, hey, how you doing, to get the standard response of good. Genuine interest in people's lives and what they do, not only at the professional level but personal level, if that's something that's possible, kind of generates the environment that people understand that you're willing to listen beyond the how are you today, right? And again, just constant communication, and then modeling, and I work on my supervisors as well. I work on the ESG knows this; they hear it constantly. So I think it's just constant repetition and modeling, right? Because it can't be just lip service.
Yeah, it'd be good to have a model like you to be able to watch those actions, because we do as others do, not as they say, right? So seeing that in action can be really important for other leaders to take that action. What I heard you say was when you talk about communication and listening, I think a lot about empathy, and how that's a critical skill for leaders.
That's a great point.
So now that we've talked a little bit about the barrier and how you're communicating with others to hear the barriers, let's talk about how we can fix them using proven problem-solving methods. Can you share an example of a situation during your leadership at NAVFAC where you identified a problem, took action to resolve it, and what the outcome was?
Yeah. So I talked about these KPIs I referenced earlier. I'm taking back to the timeline between 2020 and 2022. And the other timeline was 15 months. 15 months is how much time we had to complete this refurbishment project, which was significant. The scope was probably worth 24 to 36 months worth of work on a regular project. We had 15 months because we had a sub leaving day before, not literally, but almost, and a sub coming day after on the 15 months. So schedule was a key driver.
Mm-hmm.
And through the use of these KPIs, again, you asked me for example, right? Blah blah blah. Not blah blah blah, but I never do these things alone. I have phenomenal teams that I've served with in the past. And this particular time, the Royca Triton down in Kings Bay was my team. But through this process of governance, through this process of talking about these issues at different levels, we were able to identify that, hey, we're slipping on the schedule, right? And so we started asking why. And so, one particular answer of the many that we received is that, well, there's a particular activity on the schedule that is dependent on a contract change that is pending. I was like, oh, okay, tell me more about that. So let's go back to the contract change. So now we're looking at the contract change KPI. We notice it's like, yeah, we're kind of slipping behind. And so we asked why, specifically for that particular change. And we also concluded that, hey, there's a submittal and there's a request for information, RFI, depending on that change that affects that activity in the schedule. And as we asked, why on the submittals and RFIs, we concluded that one of the, key stakeholders, constructor, A&E, and government, I'm not going to tell you who to protect the innocent, had not allocated enough resources to the processing of RFIs and submittals.
I see.
And so the stakeholder involvement allowed us to say, hey, stakeholder one,
yeah.
Can you do better here? And the answer was like, absolutely, I can, right? And so I will spare you from the details, but the bottom line was, through that engagement, through that analysis, 1-2 more people were allocated to this process, that's not in the field, right?
Right.
That allowed us to, get through contract changes quicker, specifically that contract change that is affecting that particular activity, and that allowed us on a critical path to get better at the schedule.
So you say critical path. To put that in GRGB speak, it's like you did a root cause analysis to really just keep asking why.
Correct.
Found these linkages, almost like building out a driver tree.
Correct.
Right, of how this where the dependencies lie in order to stay on schedule. That's fascinating. Anything else you want to tell us about? This seems to be a really good example. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
I think anybody that's heard me at meetings, specifically at ELTs, but as I talk to my subordinate commands, they've heard this, so it won't be foreign to them.
The other AOR.
I absolutely believe that that high performing teams are adopting them.
Yeah.
And really our job within GRGB is to ensure that maybe those teams that are not performing at that level learn from these best practices, understand how how this all ties together, right? And remember, you have to start with some goosebump kind of goal, so that you really feel motivated to enact and produce and and live the spirit of all this.
But it sounds like a lot of this is already, we opened this conversation with policies, a whole bunch of policy. A lot of people don't enjoy reading policy documents, but it sounds like that is the foundational element to establishing the standards, so that you can set the goals, so that you can then measure the performance indicators to see if you're meeting those goals.
You got it.
Yeah,
you could have done this interview yourself.
Well, I happen to be, so I really enjoy policy, so I'm the nerd, I'm the policy nerd, but I just, as you talk through it, you really step through the foundation and to where you are today, which is successful project execution. Yeah. That's pretty incredible how systematic that was.
I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of, our entire team across, the enterprise, because, they do phenomenal things. But as you state, I'm a believer in standards. The standards are out there. In this particular case, I talked to you about governance, which, is something that I'm passionate about. And I believe through a process like that, we can truly move the needle on things that matter the most.
And just to confirm, the policy documents that you cited, they satisfy all of the requirements that you needed to do this. You could find most of this in those policy documents. Yeah,
absolutely. Great. I did leave. I did say it's scalable, right? So if you read the governance, by the letter, you'll conclude that some projects, don't need this level of governance.
Yes.
My argument is that, I get it, I understand, but at different levels, and this is the true piece about empowerment and elevation of issues. At different levels, there's somebody out there that understands, whether it's a FIA director or a construction manager or a project manager at a particular FEC, that will say, this project is risky. And on the governance, scale, and what we have labeled as, these are the projects where we will live the full spirit of this. You might find that there's value in some scale of this, and that's why we talked about the elevation of issues, right? You don't need to have a fully formed governance around a high risk project. It could be low visibility but high risk. Or it could be high visibility and low risk, and we depend on the judgment of each and every one of our people to truly identify these projects, to truly live the spirit of the governance at a scalable, to the extent that it's possible. I was telling somebody yesterday, it's like, if I had to spend half of my time tending to ELTs, the executive level team meetings, I would welcome that. Because that's how you truly enact change and progress and effectiveness and efficiency.
Excellent.
In my opinion.
Yeah, well, this has been an excellent conversation. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
No, I don't think so. Once again, I welcome the opportunity to be here. Phenomenal, and especially with a topic that, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about. And I wore short sleeves so you can see the goosebumps as I read my goals. So,
of course, yeah. Mine are hidden, but
But
honestly, those goals were extremely well articulated to meeting the Navy mission, right? Well, thank you, Admiral Cuadros, for sharing your insights today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you to everybody who took the time to listen and learn about NAVFAC Atlantic Commander and how to begin using Get Real, Get Better problem-solving methods. I look forward to sharing more with you next time. Signing off.